And now I'd like to introduce LWV San Diego President, Lori Thiel.
Hi, Kim. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Kim. I'd like to welcome everyone here. I'm going to give us all kind of a general overview about what we're going to do today. And then Kim's going to come back on and kind of walk us through the actual workshop part of this. So I want to apologize in advance to anybody who's already done this and been doing this for 15 or so years, because I know that what I'm about to do is going to perhaps sound redundant and tedious to you, but I'm really proud to announce that we have so many new members that this is a really good opportunity for them to learn some basic interactions that we do here at the League and some of the important work that we do. So I'm going to get a little bit wonky for just a second and frame this discussion, and I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to walk you through a little bit of what we're here to do today. So give me one sec. Okay, so today what we're doing is program planning, and in particular, this is for the state league. So in odd numbered years, which 2021 is, the state program planning process occurs, and it occurs in advance of our state convention. So program can include both education and advocacy work. And the state League Board of Directors evaluates the responses from local leagues. So all across the state, local leagues are doing what we're doing today. And they are the leagues, along with the current state issues and available financial and human resources, the state will develop a proposed league program, and they will present it to us, their membership, at the convention this summer. So on odd numbered years, the states host their convention, and even number years is the national convention. So we do this work in preparation for providing the state board of directors information on how to direct their activities and to do their work on our behalf. And so we do that by providing them information on what we think they should be working on, and it's considered issues for emphasis. And again, this emanates from the work that we all do here today and other leagues across California. So what we're supposed to do here today, and our desired outcome, is to propose up to 3 issues for emphasis for the state league to work on. And as I said, Kim's going to walk you through this in particular. I'm just giving you the outline here. And in addition to those 3 issues for emphasis, we need to also provide the names of members who would be willing to work on those issues that we bubble up to the state league. So it's part of the work in the breakout rooms today is going to be to come up with this information. So a little bit about state positions and what we're doing. So as you know, the league doesn't take action on legislation that we don't have a position on. And so part of the work of what we're doing is trying to direct the state league on their activities for the next couple of years. And that's all built upon positions. So this is just a quick screen video. This is the state's website. And if you go to this page on it, you can see that it's just a whole list of not only state positions, but national positions too. This is an interactive page. You can click on any of these positions and learn about what the state and national position is on each of these particular positions or policies. Hold on, let me escape this for one second. So back to what we were talking about regarding the overarching point of the work we're doing here today. It allows the state league to take action and focus their activities. And so, how does that action happen? Like, what does that mean? Well, so on the local level, and today we're going to try to evaluate and provide opportunities for state level interaction. It means that they can participate in coalitions. They can either build a coalition around some work that we've directed them to do, or they can join coalitions that perhaps are already doing that work. It allows the league to meet with and lobby elected officials. It allows us to testify before legislative bodies, and it allows us to mobilize members and voters to do activism on our behalf. So this whole notion of what we're doing here today is to provide an opportunity for all of the leagues in the state to speak with one voice, because if we all focus up and we focus our attention and our activism in certain discrete areas, it allows us to be more effective, and it also allows us to be more coherent and cohesive. So and this is the result of everything that I've talked to you today about so far, this framing. This is just kind of an overview of how this works itself out in the end. So these are the outcomes from the last election cycle. And so the elections advocacy work that the State League did, here are some of the outcomes. So you all may remember on our last, on the 2020 general, we voted for Prop 17. That was a big coalition that our State League was a participant in and advocated very strongly for, and they pushed that advocacy down to our level as well. All the leagues throughout the state advocated for that, and that ended up passing, that along with the Racial Justice Act, which was actually signed into law afterwards. So this is some advocacy that our State League has done on our behalf, and we've done on their behalf to kind of coalesce and promote these particular pieces of legislation. It doesn't always work though. You know, as you all know, we also advocated very strongly, and we were part of a coalition that advocated for Prop 15, which failed, and also Prop 16, which I'm still scratching my head about that. I don't know why that one fell, but again, this is just kind of, I'm just walking through the whole process, start to finish, and this is kind of how the last outcome went for us. So anyway, this is the frame of what we're doing here today and why we're doing it. And Kim's going to go forward and take questions now, but I guess maybe I should at this point also take any questions that anybody has about the framing of this. So if you have any questions, maybe you can just put them in the chat, or, you know, pose them as Kim's setting up to kind of walk us through the actual work of this process. And then maybe I can come back to them later if you don't understand or are confused. But I think that after we get started and get into this, it'll all become pretty clear about what we're doing and why we're doing it and what's important to us and what we want to provide as far as our feedback to the State League. So I'm going to hand it over to Kim now. Thanks.
Thank you, Lori. So I do see a couple of questions in the chat. Francesca's asking, can we do a retrospective on 15 and 16 to understand why they failed?
I believe the state does do that. That is part of kind of their advocacy work. So they will be looking into that. And a lot of organizations are doing postmortems on Prop 15. And you've probably read about it. I mean, there have been a lot of editorials in the news about Prop 15. That was a huge lift. And, you know, there was a lot of disinformation about Prop 15 out there. So anyway, the short answer to your question is yes, there will be postmortems on both of those, and there actually have already been on Prop 15 for sure. Any other questions, Kim?
So Francesca and Patty both said they really like the closed captioning. It is nice if you have to step away to use the bathroom or something, you can come back and just read what you missed. And then Jane asked, what were the issues for emphasis for the state over the past 2 years? And I have a slide for that later, but to make it a short answer, the Making Democracy Work, climate change, and criminal justice, right?
Right. And
Okay.
Making Democracy Work, that one comes down from the national. So national also has, you know, issues for emphasis. And so because we're a national organization with so many different opportunities for advocacy, it's a really, and this is what we're doing today, is a nice way to organize our work and organize our messaging, our activism, and coalesce around particular issues that are important. Every state gets to do this, by the way. So national has this overarching like umbrella idea about what to produce or what kind of activism to follow, but each state gets to determine for itself also where to direct their resources. So every state across the country is doing similar work as our State League is doing to try to get information from this grassroots type of activism that we're doing today to figure out how to direct their resources and their work. So thanks for that question.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on. So I'm going to share my screen and talk about questions to consider as we set priorities. So we want to ask ourselves, what do members want and how could they get involved? And what opportunities are there to leverage LWVSD's resources and membership? We also want to look at what other organizations are addressing the issue. Maybe there's someone else who's really on top of it and we don't need to jump in, or maybe there's groups that we can be in coalitions with. And then the DEI lens, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion, is a way of examining a program, a process, or a product, or otherwise with how it will be perceived by a variety of communities, voices, and perspectives, and what barriers may exist that are preventing it from being fair or inclusive to everyone. So we'll go a little deeper into that on the next slide. So, sorry, I lost my place here. Here we go. So we want to ask who is involved in the process. We want to look at who the key stakeholders are. Is it a diverse group? Are we including an impacted group or community? We want to look at who will be impacted, who benefits, and who is burdened. We need to consider marginalized groups and how they might be impacted. We ask ourselves, what are the intended and unintended outcomes? Does this align with our vision for an equitable and inclusive league? What changes could be made to make this more equitable? So this slide, planning for impact. So what comes out of program planning at the top here feeds into our issues for advocacy. And of those issues, we want to choose the ones that are in this impact area, where they come together with our capacity and leadership, meaning our volunteer interest and the amount of time we have to put into something. And also on the other side, the opportunity. So are there bills or is there something in the governor's agenda that makes us think that we might be able to get this done in the next 2 years? Are there ballot measures already in the works? So we want to choose something that can really have an impact. Okay, so selecting issues we want the league to prioritize. So we want to think both short and long term about where we should engage and where we can make a difference. So some of the choices are community education about an issue, advocacy, study of an issue, which could be a traditional study or possibly a concurrence with a position reached by another league or the recommendations of a resource committee, an update study of an issue on which the state league already has a position, or any combination of these. Advocacy on one aspect of an issue while another aspect is being studied or updated, or a combination of action and community education on the same issue. So we ask for members to volunteer because we are a grassroots organization and we want our work to represent the interests of our members. The State League is all of us, and the way we get things done at the state level is by volunteers from local leagues working together. So as Jane brought up, over the last 2-year period, making democracy work was a big part of it. That came down from national, and that's going to be a big part of it again. So these issues that you see on the screen are already in the plans for the next 2 years, and we don't need to talk about adding these. So making democracy work 2021 includes redistricting and apportionment, election administration reforms, voter protection and mobilization, and money in politics. So the recommendations that we have received from other leagues, state committees, and from our members themselves are as follows: climate change, water resources, criminal justice, healthcare, secure elections. And then we initially, someone said that they were going to submit one for housing and homelessness, but then after looking into it a little more, determined that the housing action policy that the State League has in place does seem to suffice. So I'm going to stop right here and see if anyone has any comments or wants to add anything or if someone really does want to go forward with housing and homelessness. Otherwise, we are planning to go into breakout rooms to discuss what we would want the state to do about these 5 issues if they were selected. So that's going to be our outcome from today, is a list of actions we would want the state to take and a list of names of volunteers in this meeting, most likely, unless you know of somebody who couldn't attend today. And we'll have that ready to submit to the state league. We are also tomorrow we'll be sending out an email to all members, which will contain a link to this video of this meeting and a survey where you can submit your top 3 choices. And when that's all tabulated, then our local league will send our top 3 to the state, and those will be voted on at the convention in June. So a couple hands raised I'm hearing, so let me get back up here. Dana, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then I will stop sharing my screen so that I can see everybody in gallery mode. Go ahead, Dana.
Hey. Hi, thanks, Kim. All right, yeah, my name's Dana Freehoff, and I actually am a volunteer with the League of Muslim Voters of California advocacy team. I think some of you know that. I spoke to the Immigration and Deportation Committee this week about immigration, and I apologize that I didn't get anything to you ahead of time. But I do think the issue, and maybe it's even more broad than just the human rights of our undocumented Californians and refugees and immigrants, but dealing with the fact that COVID just highlighted the inequalities that we see in California, that I'm just curious as to why that isn't an issue. Is it too broad? Does it have to be more narrow? Because it seems to me that that is the equity in regards to so many issues and is so important for California. So I was just curious as to why that isn't an issue.
It does sound really broad to me.
Yeah.
It does. And it's probably not because it hasn't, like we talked about earlier, all the leagues in California will submit ideas for issues for emphasis. And then this summer, we as members or the delegates get to vote on this, and the state league will take direction based on the outcome of that. So, perhaps I think your point is well taken, because here in San Diego, like, we are the border, and we do see a lot of ramifications of immigration and deportation, whereas perhaps leagues in Central or Northern California just don't see it like we do, and perhaps it just hasn't gained enough traction because of that. So I think that's probably the simple answer to your question.
Yeah, and it's not so much the issue of immigration, because that's a federal issue. It's more the humane treatment of our undocumented Californians regarding healthcare and other things. So and that's an issue for, I think, all of California. But I understand.
Yeah. Well, so okay, well, you've kind of broadened that a little bit more. You've taken a step back from immigration per se. So I will tell you, one of the things that the state and national like to do is use positions that are already in place to advocate in areas that there aren't necessarily positions that are obvious. So like this National League has a position that actually addresses your point just now about the humane treatment of individuals and how we're supposed to behave toward our fellow man. So that information is actually, or that position is actually out there and used in other areas to advocate.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. I'm new, so I'm still understanding. Thanks.
No, I'm glad.
Seeing no other questions, I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to talk more in depth about these issues. And we should have about 7 minutes for each one. Francesca, would you mind being our timekeeper and just pop into the chat like what time we should stop talking about each one? Thank you. All right.
Kim, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
It looks like, does Beryl have a question? I see it in the chat.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Beryl. Oh, sorry, I have to unmute you. There you are. Okay. Go ahead.
All right, to follow up on what Dana said, I think we can approach this in these breakout rooms by talking about healthcare for everybody, particularly COVID-related healthcare. I mean, if we don't treat everybody the same, we're not safe ourselves. And it could also be in the housing part and the criminal justice part, so we can just break it up into those different topics. But my other question is why that secure elections is in there if we already have voter democracy, protecting democracy, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, and we'll definitely discuss that. It doesn't look like she is here. Anita, who submitted it, said she would be here to explain a little more about what her thinking was. So we'll see when we get to that one.
Are we going to have one for homelessness or not?
No. And I'll display the current position so we can talk about that. So, and you all received this via email, or at least links to these recommendations. This one came from Diz Swift, who is the State League Climate Change Program Director and also the co-chair of the National League Climate Team. So she has stated that climate change is a global emergency. Heat records are being broken, glaciers are melting, and the seas are rising. We have reached a point where no matter what we do, we cannot avoid a very different climate future. We must act now to prevent truly catastrophic consequences. Both in the state and the National League have declared a climate emergency. She says, please continue to include climate action as a high priority in this year's program planning. She says it's a high need because every individual and every group is needed for the climate fight. No one can stand apart. We need all of us with all of our talents to change our course. The powerful voice of the League will help spur nonpartisan and immediate action. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to open it up to comments or questions. As it was mentioned earlier, climate change was a top issue for the last biennium. So it will not be anything new to them at the State League if it gets voted in again. So raise your hand either digitally or I can't really see you all, but maybe, yeah, either type something in the chat or raise your hand if you want to discuss climate change. I see one hand up, Jane Andrews.
I was wondering, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was wondering if you have a sense, climate change was an issue for emphasis for the last 2 years. And what sorts of action did the State League take on it? And I think it's a very good issue for emphasis. It's a broad issue, but I was again just wondering how what the state has done on this recently. And maybe even, again, I'm new to the California League. I assume there's kind of a climate change advocacy team at the state level who's following bills and things like that. So I was just wondering, I see Mary Hampson said she could respond to that, so.
Yeah, we do have an advocacy team that works very hard at the state level and does keep an eye on not only legislation that's coming through, but coalitions that are forming around that legislation. So what this allows them to do is just keep it, like, prioritize climate change in their legislative advocacy and to partner with coalitions that are pushing for climate change legislation that's helpful in that area. In fact,
and the State League also stated in their advocacy wrap up that with a new focus on the COVID-19 crisis and the resulting deficit, almost all the efforts on climate change were just stalled last year.
That link that Kim just referenced is called Advocacy Wrap Up, and it's also on the state website. It's a really good page to take a look, and it does let you kind of look back over the bills that they're following and how they advocated for them and what the outcome of their advocacy was. It's a really good way to kind of update yourself on the status of the league's work.
Cheryl has her hand raised as well.
Can you hear me, Kim?
Yes, go ahead.
So my question about the climate change is, I'm active with the Public Health Association, and one of the things that's really clear with climate change is that it disproportionately impacts communities, lower socioeconomic communities of color, and so that any plan that came forward or any policy should address that fact, I think, and that somehow we need to make sure that that's part of that whole approach.
Definitely. Mary Hansen.
I was just going to, well, follow up on what Cheryl said. Is absolutely, this is fits with concerns about inclusion and equity. The task force that's in place right now at the state level is really humming along very well. I'm part of that, as a couple other people from San Diego County are. And there's different subgroups. I'm food, soil, and agriculture, which is actually quite fascinating. But another great thing about what's happening with the climate change is the tie-in with national, so that the California Task Force and the LWVUS Task Force are working really closely together. And the infrastructure is in place, the action is happening. And so it's, in my mind, it would be kind of silly not to continue it, because there's so many leaguers involved in doing good work and doing effective work. And so I just wanted to mention that it's really quite impressive, I think, what the State League is doing currently. And I would urge our league to support that. That's all.
Thank you. And I saw Beryl's comment about that the state is approving fracking still, and we should push to stop that. So I just made a note of that, and that's something that we can add to the notes that will come out of the breakout room. I'm guessing we're kind of getting close to our 7 minutes, Francesca. But we'll go to Kathy's question, then move on to the next issue.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, good. Thank you. I think climate change is really so important. It's essential that we be involved. But here's one that could participate with many and collaborate with many other groups in the city, including the city council. So to me, it's extremely important that we move on, and we wouldn't be alone. In other words, it would be joining in with other groups within the city who are working on this. So
Yes, thank you. There are definitely lots of good climate groups in San Diego that we could work with. And Jeannie Brown put in the chat that the State League is supporting legislation to increase carbon sequestration. So moving on to our next topic. Water resources. So this was submitted by Jane Wagner-Tyak and Roberta Borgnovo, who are the co-chairs of, sorry, I lost their committee name, but I think it was the State League on Water or something. When climate change has a direct impact on some aspects of water management, water resources is much broader in scope. Until water is designated as an issue for emphasis, the State League will be unable to allocate the necessary resources to respond to extensive and significant annual proposals for legislation affecting water at both the state and local levels. The League of Women Voters of California's position on water resources states, support measures that promote the management and development of water resources in ways that are beneficial to the environment, with emphasis on conservation and high standards of water quality that are appropriate for the intended use. The state position enables the LWVC to address proposed legislation affecting planning and management of water resources, water quality control, surface and groundwater supplies, conservation, fiscal objectives, protection of the Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta, and San Francisco Bay estuary ecosystem. The conservation of and conveyance of water, quality control, and access to clean, affordable drinking water are vital to all Californians, urban and rural, of every economic situation. So we will take questions and comments now about water resources. Raise your hand or type a message in the chat if you would like to be recognized.
Well, there doesn't seem to
Right.
be a lot of conversation around this, but I will, Kim and I talked about this a couple of days ago regarding the fact that water resources was kind of pulled. It seems like it's very closely related to climate change, and I think it is. And I believe the authors of this did recognize that, but they seem to be suggesting that there's more to it, and it requires specific, detailed advocacy. And I think the purpose of this is to call it out and make it a more discrete idea than just climate change, and kind of pull it out from under the umbrella so that it can be addressed in a more vigorous way.
I wonder too if this is something, when thinking about the DEI lens, is this something that affects certain communities more than others, or certain vulnerable populations?
Yeah, Vicki pointed out that it's going to become a big issue as we go forward. I mean, I think as climate change becomes more impactful, it will definitely affect water and water resources disproportionately, to Vicki's point. And then Beryl apparently has a comment too.
Well, it's not directly related to water resources, but we have so many little water districts, and we would save a lot of money if we could consolidate those. There's a lot of administration and big salaries and stuff that goes into those water districts.
Okay, thank you. Dana?
Yeah, when I think Lori talked about the equity issue, and I think what we're seeing from COVID, and the State Water Resources Control Board conducted a survey on this, is the affordability issue of folks being able to pay for their water. It isn't so much an issue in San Diego County, it is in South County, but not throughout the county, mainly in South County. So that could be an element. I know there's 2 bills that have been introduced in the state legislature regarding this issue on affordability and accessibility. So just to let folks know that could be an issue, because when folks can't pay their water bills, that means there's no revenue going into the water district. They can't pay for capital facilities, and and then that makes it difficult for them to provide that quality of water. So that is another issue that's currently I guess in the forefront in regards to water resources.
Thanks, Dana. I'm going to read a quick comment from Peg, and then Kim, maybe you can allow anybody else with a raised hand. But Peg, who used to run our Natural Resources Committee, pointed out in the chat, this is an essential partner to climate change as a priority. The Climate Change Task Force is doing well at building understanding of decarbonization, but this will be the major issue in California's adaptation to climate change.
All right. Cheryl, go ahead.
I agree. I think the water resource area is really linked closely to climate change. But just a couple of comments. So the protection of the Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta, and San Francisco Bay estuary is very critical. It's also, very regional in some ways, much more directed toward that part of California. And there's a lot of other parts of California that are dealing with it, as far as not having access to water because it's being privatized, farmers not having access to it because large agri companies are taking it. So I'm just wanting to be mindful of the fact that when we talk about planning and management of water resources, there are lots of parts of California that are dealing with issues as critical as the protection of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. And I just don't want that regional emphasis to be driving this.
Okay. We're down to about 30 seconds on this one. So if anybody else wants to say something, raise your hand now. Francesca says, a huge part of this seems like community literacy. I don't think people understand the water scarcity we are up against. Very true. Okay, Jane's got her hand up. Last one.
I'm new to California, but it does strike me that water is a huge issue. And one of the things that I'm aware of is that there needs to be a renegotiation of the Colorado River Compact by 2026. So there's going to be some broader regional activity on this issue that I think the league should pay attention to.
Okay, thank you. Next issue is criminal justice, and this is going to be 2 slides. But just starting here, the demonstrations since the police killing of George Floyd have underscored the importance of the League's work in criminal justice reform. So the National League called for justice for those who have lost their lives or been harmed mentally or physically as a result of America's pervasive culture of anti-Blackness. So they made that statement, which is there in italics. And then at the convention, the national convention last June, the LWV of Missouri, in conjunction with 20 other state leagues and 27 local leagues, including our state league, proposed an emergency urgent resolution on racial justice for Black people and all people of color. And that was adopted. It said, we resolve first that the league advocates against systemic racism in the justice system and, at a minimum, for preventing excessive force and brutality by law enforcement. We also call for prompt actions by all league members to advocate within every level of government to eradicate systemic racism and the harm that it causes. So 2 years ago, the State League adopted a criminal justice position that supports a justice system that is just, effective, equitable, transparent, and that fosters public trust at all stages. And criminal justice reform was also made a priority issue. A couple of things they were able to work on because of that was the Racial Justice Act, AB 2200, which was landmark legislation that prohibited the state from seeking or obtaining a criminal conviction or from imposing a sentence based on race, ethnicity, or national origin. And Jeannie told me that that passed, but they're also now working on getting it to be retroactive. The state also sponsored Free the Vote, which we all know as Prop 17, which restored voting rights to 50,000 Californians on parole. So the State Criminal Justice Committee is asking that local leagues add criminal justice as a recommended priority to the state league during program planning so they can continue the goals to transform the justice system into one of rehabilitation rather than punishment and strive to accomplish the goals set out by LWVUS's urgent resolution. So, just looking to see here if anyone wants to speak.
While you are assembling your questions, I just want to point out, back to the original portion of this conversation when I was trying to just frame for everybody like how all this works and why it works like it does. This criminal justice position came to fruition last state convention. So this is how advocacy works. The state, the delegates at the state convention 2 years ago voted to have criminal justice as a new position for the league and to allow all the leagues to advocate with it, obviously. And our local league has advocated multiple times with this criminal justice position. It's really a nice way for us all to get on the same page and work together to push forward to legislation, not only at the state level, but at local levels as well. So this is a perfect example of how what we're doing today ultimately comes to fruition.
Anyone have a comment or question to add? I don't see any hands raised digitally. I can't really see very many of you visually, but I think we're maybe moving on quickly with this one. Jeannie Brown says criminal justice is important regarding voting access. Definitely. Okay, moving on. Healthcare. Aligned, so now this comes from a league up north. I think it was Bay Area. Does anyone know what BAE stands for? I think it's 3 cities in the Bay Area. Aligned with LWVUS in its recent call to ensure quality healthcare for all Americans as a priority. There it is, League LWV of Berkeley, Albany, and Emeryville voted last weekend, as have LWV Diablo Valley and LWV Southwest Santa Clara Valley, to make healthcare reform one of its 3 state and local issues of emphasis. Please consider joining us in making healthcare reform an issue of emphasis to address the glaring inequities and ineffectiveness of our current system, dramatically revealed by the pandemic. So they are also relaunching their healthcare reform team, and they're looking into a realistic path to a single payer system. So we will take questions and comments on healthcare.
Well, I'll just pop in while people are thinking and perhaps considering. So several people in our league have commented on the need for healthcare and maybe a more concerted look at healthcare and an opportunity for people to legislate and kind of get on the same page about it. We don't have a healthcare committee here at our local league, but if this did pass as one of the issues for emphasis, ultimately, it would probably benefit us to start one here as well. So, you know, this could parlay into some activism locally, not just at the state, if we decided to, you know, move forward with this one.
Yep. And there were a couple bills last year relating to undocumented immigrants being able to get Medi-Cal. There was one proposal for those age 65 and up to get it. There was one for young adults, and I don't, Beryl, do you remember? I don't think either of them passed, or Jane, I think you know. Obviously, it was a tough year with the budget last year, but just keeping in mind that we are talking about at the state level, so. Dana, oh, she did have her hand up for a second. Yeah. Go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Yeah, as you mentioned, there were 2 bills last legislative session. One that provided full scope Medi-Cal benefits to undocumented Californians 65 and older. And there was a second one that actually provides full scope Medi-Cal benefits for all undocumented Californians. People that are immigrants or undocumented Californians that are under 25 can currently get full scope Medi-Cal benefits. And both those bills did not pass through the legislature, I think because of COVID and the funding issues, but they have both been reintroduced this legislative session. So yes, that's to answer your question.
Thank you. And Jeannie Brown wrote in the chat, is there anyone in attendance with a background in health? Jane, you look like you want to talk. I'm not gonna offer you to unmute.
I worked in a hospital for 40 years and I have a master's in public health. And I do think health is more of a national issue and that the real resolution for it should be dealt with nationally. I think it's harder to pick apart the state issues. So it doesn't grab me as a state issue in the same way that some of the others do.
And that's kind of what Mary Hansen said in the chat. She said, is this group asking us to consider an independent single payer system for California? Otherwise, this seems like a more appropriate issue of emphasis for LWV US. Cheryl Noncaro as well has a background in national health insurance and agrees that it is a national issue.
Kim, I would add that I'm really impressed with healthcare at the county level here. it really beats what they have in Massachusetts.
That's good to know. Jeannie Brown.
Yes, when we were doing this healthcare position years ago, one of the things we learned is that the way Canada got their healthcare reform is that one territory, one province, I think it was Saskatchewan, they put it in. And because it worked so well and all of the problems that were thought to have arisen didn't arise, then the rest of the country went with it. And so it was suggested that California be the first.
And to Jeannie's point, that is that is how other major national issues have ultimately come to fruition and passed here in this country as well. You know, if you think about like gay marriage, that perhaps was initially perceived as a national issue, but what happened instead is local municipalities, including entire states, began to take action and make legislation allowing gay marriage. And so ultimately, once so many states had a groundswell of support for it, it did bubble up and become a federal law. And, you know, it did make its way to the federal and national level. So I think to Jeannie's point, it is, you do have the opportunity to affect national law at a state level, especially if your state is the size of California.
And Jean Widener asked, does Massachusetts still have a statewide healthcare system?
We got blended, Massachusetts got blended into the ACA, but it was an example. I think there are problems with California, you know, being seen as too far ahead of the rest of the country too, so.
Okay, we're down to 1 minute. Any last questions? Jeannie Brown, go ahead.
I think with the with this COVID pandemic, that a lot of people who were not for universal healthcare have changed their mind. So it is very timely.
Okay, moving on. Secure elections. And I believe Anita's here, but I'm not sure. Can you start your video so I know which one you are? Because I think they've got the wrong name. I'll just ask both of you to unmute. While we're waiting, I'll just read this. So for secure elections, understanding the potentials for hacking our election systems and evaluating the current guidelines for certifying election machines, improving the security of the California voter registration system by requiring improved proof of identity, study of the conditions that prevent the pre-registration programs from achieving a higher rate of teen voter activity. Are you there, Anita?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Before, during, and after the 2020 election, there have been charges like the election has been stolen, the election was rigged, the election was a fraud. I don't believe it was rigged, stolen, or fraud. I want the Dominion voting systems to prove in its suits against Fox News, Giuliani, and others that the company was libeled. But millions of Americans believe that there was fraud. The areas of the election process mentioned include that the voting machines were programmed, that the US mail systems were sabotaged, that there was a lack of security in handling and counting the paper ballots, that there are flaws in our voter registration systems. A study would provide information to support our understanding of the guidelines for election administration from the Secretary of State. and to support or oppose changes in those guidelines. For example, our signature recognition system between the Department of Motor Vehicles and the Secretary of State has problems, which include the accuracy of the recognition system, the lack of cooperation between the two departments, and the question of whether an additional method of documentation should be required. Our voting systems are vulnerable to cyber intrusions by foreign backers, and information about foreign hackers would be a part of the study of the guidelines for California elections. There is an Office of Election Cybersecurity in our Secretary of State's department. Understanding the strength and weaknesses of the administration of our elections would make this a valuable tool for both education and advocacy. Thank you for the opportunity to expand on my suggestion.
Thank you for providing that further information. I think that helps us to understand more. Beryl put in the chat, I don't hear such accusations for California. And Jean Widener said, is it possible to expand this category to include overall election reform, such as abolishing the Electoral College, ranked choice voting? And Cheryl agrees with that. Does anyone want to respond to that before we go to the people with their hands raised? I mean, the Electoral College thing is more of a national issue because California has already joined the National Popular Vote Compact. I'll go to Francesca.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Anita, I love this. Thank you for bringing it up for discussion. One thing that I've read about, not enough, obviously, is just the level of access to proof of identity. And so I think one thing that I would want to be really cognizant of if we did decide to kind of go forward with this is like barriers to entry for voters. And like if we're improving the security of the voter registration by like requiring improved proof of identity, like is that potentially harmful to communities that have trouble accessing like proof of identity that they would need in order to vote? I mean, for me, this feels I struggle because I feel like part of the League of Women Voters is getting as many people to vote as possible. So like increasing barriers feels a little, I don't know, I struggle with that a little. But anyway.
Yes, and that's exactly what was meant in the DEI slide when it talked about what are the unintended consequences of this. So yes, it may stop all those accusations that, you know, people non-alive California citizens are voting or something, but it might also prevent certain people from voting if they do not have an ID. And there are tens of thousands of people in that situation. We may not know any of them or understand why, but they're out there. Cheryl.
Yes, I think Francesca brings up a good point. And also I think sort of categorizing it as secure brings that whole point in of, you know, making sure we don't have people voting who shouldn't be. And I think it should be part of a broader category, which is, you know, we want to encourage voting. We want to make sure people can vote in safe conditions. So, you know, the integrity of the election systems would be a part of the broader category of just making sure people can vote and can get access to vote and be safe in that. And that, I think, is really the core issue that we should be looking at.
I'd like to respond to Vicky.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry about that. So Vicky wrote in the chat, I have heard arguments that voter files need purged, that they believe some of the charges because of that, and we as a league need to address it. So I do want to address that because prior to the elections of 2020, the registrar of voters did approach our league and other local voting rights organizations and tell us that part of their, I guess, voter roll maintenance, as they call it. I mean, I think, Vicki, you're referring to it as a purge here, but the Registrar of Voters is required to make sure that the voter rolls are up to date and maintained. And so they do interact with organizations like ours and let us know. They gave us access to the list of the people on their rolls that they thought were questionable, their priorities for purging or maintaining or cleaning up that roll were people who hadn't voted in the last 2 general elections and who had not responded to the Registrar of Voters outreach to update their voter rolls. So, you know, also remember too that elections are run locally. And so, you know, just because our Registrar of Voters is that conscientious, it doesn't mean that every Registrar of Voters is, but I believe every ROV is required to maintain their voter rolls and make sure that, in the state of California anyway, make sure that they're accurate. So hopefully, Vicki, that helps or answers your question.
Okay, Margie Larson has her hand up, and then we're just about out of time. Are you able to unmute, Margie?
I thought you had unmuted. Yes, we discussed this several years ago very heavily. That was a major thing, but I think we have very secure election systems in California now. And I would say this would be a lower priority compared to criminal justice or the water issue. The water issue, I didn't know how to hit the right thing to raise your hand, but if there are other organizations that are working on this, you know, we would prefer to work on the ones that there aren't organizations in activities. Anyway,
Thank you. Okay, so our final topic, I believe, is housing and homelessness. And as I stated before, this was withdrawn as an issue, but we're still just going to briefly go over the State League's homelessness action policy and their position on housing and homelessness. So Lori's going to walk us through that. And then after this, we'll go to breakout rooms.
Okay, thank you, Kim. So I'm just going to quickly talk a little bit about the homelessness action policy. So this, we actually alluded to this earlier today in our conversation because, you know, as we were talking about, the league doesn't necessarily have a particular position that's designated to specific detailed activism, but it does have enough issues and opportunities to pull different discrete positions and comments and ideas from disparate positions to allow us to pull them together into some cohesive like super policy. So that's what the homelessness action policy is. It's a really brilliant way to use activism or policies that are already in place for activism. So here in San Diego, for example, our 2 leagues pulled together and did a research to create a homelessness action policy that you see here on your screen that essentially says League of Women Voters of California supports actions to reduce and eliminate homelessness, both sheltered and unsheltered throughout the state. And, you know, obviously homelessness is a big issue everywhere in the country. We have seen it a lot in California, I believe, partly because of our high cost of living here. So it was important for our local activists to have a policy that we could take action on when we had issues that came up, say, before local city councils or boards of supervisors. We wanted to be able to advocate on that and have a coherent policy and a cohesive action plan that we could advocate on. So this is already in place, and you can see on your screen it's pretty robust. We have a lot of vertical issues that we can talk about, and this particular policy was gleaned from literally 6 different issues or positions there you can see at the bottom, including children and family issues, housing and homelessness, land use. So it's a really comprehensive way to address activism surrounding homelessness locally and at the state level. So is there any question about that and where we stand on our ability to kind of bring this to fruition? before we go and talk about the housing and homelessness position, or should we just go ahead and click on that and review that?
Beryl said we have a good action policy, but the state league could be advocating on it. And Vicky said if we could have an asked and answered page of factual information, maybe put it on our website, that would be something we could go to and share.
So we'll just to continue to delve a little bit deeper into this. So regarding the position on housing and homelessness, I'll just read the position in brief, but you can actually go there as well and take a look. But it says, support of equal opportunity in housing, support of measures to provide state programs to increase the supply of safe, decent, and adequate housing for all Californians, and support for action at all levels of government for the provision of affordable housing for all Californians. So these are the positions. That is the position on housing and homelessness. And you've also seen the action policy that we can use to advocate for housing and homelessness as well. So any other comments or questions about these two policies or this policy and this position, and whether or not we want to push forward for an emphasis on these?
Beryl has her hand raised.
Why was it withdrawn? Why was it withdrawn?
Because it was felt that we already have a policy that's working. The housing action policy is adequate. Margie Larson.
It allows each of the communities to take action on homelessness throughout California, where they see a need. So that's why I didn't think the state needed to emphasize it, because this is an action policy that every community can work on.
Makes sense. Okay, so at this point, we are getting ready to go into breakout rooms, and we're going to need a couple volunteers in each room. One person to take notes, and the other person to pull up a web page that just lists what the issue was, which I showed on the previous 5 slides. It would be one of those. And at the bottom of that page is going to be the list of questions of what we need to talk about in the breakout room. So you're going to have access to this on your computer once you get in there. So don't feel like you have to memorize it right now. But if this issue is selected, what do we want LWVC to do? So you will discuss how league positions have been used in the past, what has kept us from being able to act on issues important to our community, and what we would like to do if we had more direction or support. Think both short and long term. The choices are community education about an issue, toolkits for local league action or education, concerted action in the legislature or state agencies, advocacy on an issue, study of an issue, an update study, or any combination of these. And then we also need you to answer the question, who from our league would be willing to work on a statewide committee on this issue? So going into the breakout rooms, you're going to choose one room and you'll have 10 minutes there. I will put this link in the chat, and I hope that, oops, sorry, maybe Francesca or Lori can do it. But I hope that one person from each group will be able to pull up this webpage and, like I said, just see the issue at the top and those questions at the bottom. So we'll need one person to take notes and email those to me at the end. When we come back to the main room, I'll give you my email address so you know for sure where to send it. And Lori and Francesca and I will be popping into rooms as well. So just to make sure that everything's going smoothly.
So that link is in the chat. And if you click on that link, you'll see the individual pages that Kim referenced just now for each of these issues. And you can choose to enter a breakout room that discusses those. So it's a self-selected breakout room, right, Kim? We're not going to tell people where to go.
Are there any questions about going into the breakout room? If so, just stay here and I will help you out. Okay, it should have popped up on your screen to give you the options of 5 rooms. Some of you are not seeing that. Okay. Let me try again. Or if you want to just type in the chat, either to a direct message to me or to everyone, it doesn't matter which room you want to go in, I can move you there. I see just a handful of people have been able to get in the rooms, maybe 6 or so. Okay, I can move G. Okay. I'm going to turn the mute off so that you guys can talk. Okay, it looks like almost everyone is back. So thank you all for the work that you did in there. I'm sorry if it wasn't totally clear how to get to the list of questions. Does anyone, oh, I would like to ask who was the person who took notes in each group. So I know that Beryl has notes and Donna and Jeannie Brown.
Rachel was in secure
Okay,
election.
Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
Was there one other group? Hold on, let me check. In climate change, are they back? The climate change groups? Was there someone taking notes in there, Mary Hansen? Maybe?
Cheryl Nancaro says she did.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Okay, so our next steps are to look for an email tomorrow with a link to this video if you want to rewatch it, and a survey where you can specify your top 3 issues. After tabulating results, the program chair, myself, will submit these recommendations to the State League at the end of this month, and they will be voted on at the LWVC convention in June. Are there any questions?
Well, I just wonder that if everybody is going to be voting and they haven't heard these discussions, seems like.
Yes. So
Yeah.
that's why we are sending out the video tomorrow. So if people didn't have a chance to attend, they can watch the video anytime in the next few days and then use the survey to place their vote.
I wonder how many people would do that. Well, okay.
Yeah, we definitely had to do things quite differently with COVID this year.
Mm-hmm.
Not the same.
So where
Any
do you
other
want our
questions?
notes?
Just email them to me, please.
Okay.
And yes, thank you, Vicki. I will make a point in the email that states they should watch the video before voting.
And I think Jeannie has a question.
Also, the people who are voting will have
Okay.
access to the documents that Kim showed as well. So even if they don't actually view the video from today, they can actually read up on the issues that we all saw as well. So they should have a lot of access for good information to help them decide on their vote.
Jean Widener?
I was just wondering if the breakout rooms were also on the recording.
No, unfortunately, it's not possible to record breakout rooms.
Could there be a note or maybe a sentence or two from each breakout room to help
Sure,
people? Yeah, to help people.
I can include anything that's sent to me today.
Okay.
I thought we were supposed to lobby for why we think it's important.
So, hold on, let me go back to the slide. So right before we went into the breakout rooms, this is what I was telling everyone, that you would be able to click the link in the chat and pull up this webpage with the list of tasks that the State League might do for us on these issues. So this was what we were supposed to be doing in the breakout rooms, was to come up with those tasks and who from our league would be willing to work on a statewide committee on this issue. Okay, well, that's it for the meeting, unless you wanted to follow up with anything, Lori.
No, I just want to thank everybody. This is this is the work that we do, and it's important work and it's good work, but it really does require a lot of thought and open-mindedness. And I just want to appreciate everybody who showed up today. I encourage everybody to vote. We're going to send this survey out to all of our members to encourage them to vote as well, so that we can give to the state a really good representation of our league and its members and what our priorities are. So I want to thank everybody for attending and showing up today and participating. And remember, check your email and vote.
Yes, thank you. And I put a link in the chat for our event survey. This is like we all know, the first time that we've done program planning online. So we learned a lot. We tried some new things, and we'd like to hear from you about how it worked for you. So if you click that link in the chat, I'll also include that in the email that I send you tomorrow. And that's it for Margie Larson. Did you want to say something?
Yes. I want to thank Anita Reese. I don't know if you know, but for years she served the Board of Supervisors, and Jane is doing that now. I don't know if you've met Anita, but we had a lot because she was an observer for years.
Okay,
Anita,
yeah, I did not know that.
Who is that? I didn't hear the name.
Anita Reese.
Oh,
She can unmute herself. Wasn't she the one that was? You have to unmute yourself, Anita.
Yes,
Yep.
Anita was one who proposed the secure elections issue for emphasis. Yeah.
No, I was not an observer of the Board of Supervisors. That was Eddie Cisco.
Oh, I'm sorry, but you were part of that group.
We're
I'm
both
sorry.
from East County.
Yeah, I know, but you were a very important member of the league in East County.
Thank
We
you.
were very happy to get Donna and Anita and a number of you from East County when we merged.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But what happened? Did she pass away? Oh,
Yes,
Yes.
oh, I'm sorry.
yes.
I'm sorry. My memory's not so good. Getting too old.
Well, thanks, Margie, and thanks, Anita, and everybody for your great work that you did today. We've run a little bit long, so I want to let everybody get back to their regularly scheduled Saturdays that don't include program planning for the League of Women Voters. So thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.